Well, we're back in the ICC review, but this time it's double the fun because we have Ravi Shastri and Ricky Ponting with us together on this episode. We're chatting about all things Border-Gavaskar Trophy. What an epic series this one has been. But first, I want to come to you, Ricky. The first win for Australia in the Border-Gavaskar Trophy since 2014, especially after they got hammered for that loss in Perth at the start of the series. Is there a sense of Aussie pride for you in the way that the men fought back in the series?
Oh yeah, I think there definitely is. Yeah, I mean, when I look back to the start of this series and just look how far off the mark the Aussies were in that first game, I think there was a lot of criticism that was flying around about the team from the way that they performed because it almost looked a little un-Australian, if you like. And I was only reading this from afar because I wasn't even there. I wasn't even there. I only did the first day, and when I left, things went downhill from there. But when you lose a test match like that against another very strong opposition side, you do have to do a bit of soul searching and do a lot of talking. And I think one of the things that probably helped the Aussies was the big break between the first two games. With India having the momentum after that first game, they would have loved to have just rolled into another game a couple of days later because everything was going right for them. But I think the break gave the Australians a chance to get away and put the media speculation and the white noise away. And it also gave them long enough to work on what they needed to work on going into the Adelaide game. So, yeah, we had a few of our players. Pat was going into Perth a little bit underdone, if you like. Travis Head was going into Perth a little bit underdone. And as we saw, it ended up being great management because those guys ended up being at their best at the back end of the 5 test matches. So, look, it's been a really good turnaround, especially when at the start of the series, I thought Australia would win 3-1, but I actually thought they'd win the early test matches. I thought they'd win Perth, I thought they'd win Brisbane and probably Adelaide and find it harder in Melbourne and Sydney. So when you look at that, the conditions that you think India would normally play better in, Australia's found a way to outplay them in Melbourne and Sydney. So it was a really good turnaround and one that they'll be happy with. And looking at it yesterday, there was only 5 players that took part in the series for Australia that actually won a series against India. So that's how much it means to the guys. There was only 3 of them in the starting 11 yesterday that had actually won a series. So it was a big hurdle that they had to get over, and they did a good job, that's for sure.
Well, that scoreline prediction by you was spot on, 3-1. But from India's point of view, Ravi, they could have drawn that test on day 3 in Sydney. Would you say that there are more positives to take away than this 3-1 scoreline indicates for India?
I would say there are positives, but not too many, to be honest, because like you mentioned, I think that was a turning point of the series. That session after tea where you lost 7 wickets in just 90 minutes of play, after doing the hard yards in that middle session where you didn't lose a wicket. So, I think a lot of the shot selection there was questionable. And in a tight series like this, you have one poor session like that, of 2 hours, it can cost you the series. And Australia pounced on that. They didn't look back. There were moments even in Sydney where India had an opportunity, but that's thanks to the pitch. No one's seen a pitch like that in Sydney ever. So because it was spicy, it gave India an outside chance of coming back. And especially with the way Jasprit was bowling, it gave India that chance. I thought they were single-handedly kept in this series by him because Australia would have dominated otherwise. His spells in Perth with the new ball were outstanding. Some of the spells with the new ball where he didn't take a wicket were as good as any in the series. And consistently, whenever he was given the ball, he broke through. So that was one massive positive, to come out. I think Jaiswal coming through the ranks, Nitish Reddy showing some promise. There were a few positives, but I think on the whole, they'll be disappointed with that batting effort. You needed the senior players to step up to the plate, be more consistent, get the big scores. And when you want to beat a team like Australia, you cannot win with 2 or 3 guys performing in a match. You need about 7 guys, to be performing to their ability or, playing above their ability. That's when you can beat a team like Australia in Australia. Otherwise, you have no chance, with just 3 or 4 performing. So India will have to dig deep there. It's in a period of transition. I think they have to try and unearth a few more fast bowlers because one man can't do the job all the time. If there was a fully fit Mohammad Shami would have made a difference. But then when you look at all their ages now, it's time for India to groom some bench strength. Give them the opportunities. You might struggle a bit over the next 12 months or so, but get them ready for the future. And I think from Australia's point of view, I thought the captain he amazes me. Even when I was a coach in the dressing room, I would just admire his determination, his, the willingness to compete. He never gives up, and it's like session after session he'll come at you, with the ball. And just when the chips were down, various times in the series, he rose to the occasion, not just with the ball, but with the bat as well. And the quality of fast bowling in the series, I must say, three guys stand out, outstanding. Jasprit, Pat Cummins, and this guy is a genius. The Scotty Boland in these conditions, you prepare a track like that. Ricky Legri, I asked Patty yesterday, I said, you've got a bowling machine with you. You just switch it on and he's on the number straight away. Right-hander, left-hander, over the wicket, round the wicket, it doesn't matter. And he's become like a cult hero. We thought he owned the MCG. But, every time he went to the boundary at the SCG, the noise was deafening to the ear. My word, he bowled well. He kept Australia. He ran through that middle order in both the innings. And an outstanding effort. Better team won. They deserve to win.
And speaking of Pat Cummins, Ricky, Steve Waugh and yourself led some great Australian teams to massive success. Where does the Pat Cummins era sit for you in terms of legacy for Australian cricket?
I mean, they've had an incredible run under Pat's leadership, and even going back slightly before Pat took over as well. This group of players has been together for a long time. They're very experienced players. The bowling group in itself have achieved some incredible things. I think Hazelwood, Stark, Cummins and Lyon, I think, have all taken over around 300 wickets each. It's the first time in Test match history that you've had four bowlers with those sort of records in the same lineup. I think I heard last night they now own every bilateral trophy there is around the world. They've got the 50 over World Cup and the World Test Championship. So they've achieved some amazing things together. And like Ravi said then, there will be a time when some regeneration needs to start with this Australian team as well. It's not just India needing to find a few young players. Australia are going to have to do the same thing. I mean, if you look through that lineup, even yesterday, there's not one player in their 20s in that team. You've got one at 19 and everyone else over 30. So that's going to be the next challenge for this Australian group, not just for the Australian team, but for Australian cricket, is to bring on this new group of young players. And we might, if you look at it, there's not many opportunities that present themselves. We've got a 2-test match tour to Sri Lanka, and then I think 2 tests in the West Indies coming up before the Ashes next summer. So if they are looking at bringing young players in, it probably needs to start in Sri Lanka and the West Indies. And if you're bringing young players into the Sri Lankan tour, that's not going to be an easy place for anyone to start. So, no, look, Pat, I agree with what Ravi said. Pat has grown as a player. He's grown as a leader. Whenever things get tough, as captain, he doesn't look around to anybody else. He brings himself straight back on into the attack and more often than not gets the job done. And it's either him getting a wicket or if he makes a bowling change, the changes he's made have led to wickets falling as well. So, no, you can only give praise to this team because they have been an incredible team. There'll be comparisons with other teams, and I'm not going to sit back and say one's better than the other because what this group has done has been pretty amazing. And I think it'll continue for a little bit longer, but changes are going to have to come at some stage.
Mm. There are going to be young campaigners that come into this side, but let's talk about the experience for a second. Gautam Gambhir, Ravi, post-match has said, and I want to quote this so I don't get it wrong, Virat and Rohit can continue to take Indian cricket forward and will make decisions on their future in the best interests of Indian cricket. Now, where do they go from here, considering there's a big England tour later in the year and the Champions Trophy more recently?
I think very important is fitness. How fit they are. That's more important than anything else. There's no substitute for experience. I agree, but for me, current form, fitness, are very, very important as well. So the next 6 months, I know there's a lot of one-day cricket, but when there's an experienced player playing, just seeing the way he's batting, you get a fair idea if we can jump onto that Test cricket bandwagon straight away. So I'll be watching very closely all the one-day games that are played, the Champions Trophy that is played, a little bit of the IPL as well, and if possible, if there's a gap for them, I think they should go back and play some domestic cricket, and see how it is, because when you play Test match cricket for that length of time, it's important to play domestic cricket for two reasons. You're abreast with the current generation. You can contribute to that younger generation with your experience. And more importantly, you get to play spin more than you will ever pay. So if you see India's record in India on turning tracks, is not the greatest. If you have quality spinners in the opposition, they can trouble you. And they have troubled India. They might have been lucky to get over a couple of series, but you saw how New Zealand exposed them, before coming to Australia. So I would leave it on that, and plus it's the hunger and desire. When you're 30, one is 36, the other is 38, they would know how hungry they are. And when they would know, there would be something in their mind that comes and says, that's enough. And I think they'll walk away. It is your passion for the game, the hunger, your fitness, and your current form. These are the things that will determine whether they want to carry on or no. As far as Virat goes, he's very fit. Rohit has had his problems with fitness, but it'll be interesting to see how they go in the one-day game first and then take a call, because all three formats of the game might be difficult. So they've retired from the T20 formats. So in a way, it's good. There's more time on their hands to go and do that domestic cricket bit as well.
Ricky, what is your perspective on this? Because you've gone on record to say that you may have gone on for a little longer than you could have. From that lens, if you were to give some advice to the likes of Rohit, Virat, and even Usman Khawaja, given the stage they are at in their careers, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on record sort of the last 10 years talking about my career, and I did play for maybe 2 years longer than I should have, and that wasn't anything to do with me. I wasn't trying to achieve any more out of the game. I continued to play on to try and help the younger group of players coming through sort of integrate into international cricket and almost be like a coach and a senior figure around the team to help them through. Because Mike Hussey was retiring as well, and we were going to be left with not a lot of experienced guys. For guys like Smith, Warner, Lyon, Haddon, we had all these young guys coming in at once, and I was still playing well, but not anywhere near my best, and the challenge is, and I can see it with Virat now. You can see how much he wants it. He's trying so hard that actually makes batting harder. The harder you try sometimes with batting, the less success you're going to have. You start, certainly with me, I started thinking more about not getting out rather than scoring runs, and that might sound strange, but that's what it was. I was trying to be so perfect, set the right example, play exactly the way my team needed me all the time. But when I was playing my best, I didn't think about any of that. I just walked out and thought about scoring runs. If I got a half volley, I drove it. If I got a short ball, I pulled it. And I can just see a little bit of that with Virat now, where, the way that he's getting out, you can see he doesn't want to be playing at those balls. He's trying not to do it, but there's some mental block there that's making him feel for that one outside the off stump. So, and remembering with Virat as well, it's been going on for a while now. He had a break. He had a mental break, didn't he? Maybe 12 months ago, 18 months ago, where he stepped away for a while and then came back and refound the love for the game again. So right now, it just seems like that real love of the game for him is not there, because he's making it too hard to enjoy. So it might be, if he wants to continue on playing Test match cricket, he might just need to have a little spell for a while, find the love for the game again. But there's no doubt that the skill's there. The skill and the talent is still there. There's no doubt about that. But sometimes you just need to get away, lock up your kit bag for a little while, spend some time with the family, and forget about how hard the game can be.
Sanjana, very good
Yes.
point there from Ricky. Very, very good point, because this now, takes my mind back right to Tendulkar, to Brian Lara, and when you evaluate their careers and see where Virat is, I think Virat still has it in him for the next couple of years to do precisely what Ricky said there. To get the youngsters coming through the ranks there, help them out, share knowledge, be part of the dressing room, contribute to the team. And, if your form is still good, and you're enjoying it, stay there. Otherwise, it will be time to move on, and your mind will tell you to do that. The same thing happened with Sachin. I think he had to play a similar role to Ricky. If you look at his last couple of years, also he himself would say he was not at his best, but he was playing well enough and wanted to contribute. The only guy I thought who just played the game where he saw the ball and smacked it was Brian. Right? So I don't think he ever thought of not getting out or surviving. He thought of smashing it. And that's why probably he scored that quickly and enjoyed himself. And when he had a run where he didn't score, he just left the game. So I think the contributing factor to this team in transition and the youngsters coming through the ranks, if you look at Jaiswal, he's 23. You look at Shubman Gill, he's 22, 23. Nitish Reddy, he's 21. There are a lot of players. Rishabh Pant, he's still very young. He's 25, 26. So, there are a lot of guys there who can benefit from the experience of a player of Virat Kohli's class.
Mm. Now, the two of you have also had massive success as the coaches of very successful teams. I want to understand from you, what did you make of the role that Gautam Gambhir and Andrew McDonald played for their respective sides through this series?
See, I think Andrew's been there for a long time. Even when I was the coach, I think he was the assistant coach to JL. So he would know the players inside out. Yeah. One thing I know with Andrew, he communicates well. He's pretty straight up when it comes to communicating and coming out with his thoughts. I think Gautam Gambhir has just taken over. He'll have to understand his players inside out mentally. It takes some time, but you've got to understand the mindset of your player. No two players are the same. And in India, it's a massive country. You come from different parts of the country, different dialects, different upbringings. Your upbringing could be totally different from a guy in the metro. You might suffer from a complex when you come into their side. You might be a shy customer, an introvert, not willing to come out. Now, this is where a coach comes into play to understand those mindsets, make him feel comfortable, get the best out of him, make him gel with everyone, ensure that the senior players in the side mix with everyone in the team, and make it a cohesive unit where there is no fingers pointing. That's the one thing I hated as a coach. And I would pull up anyone. If I saw from the outside or I felt, there was finger pointing going on, that's the last thing I wanted to see here in the dressing room. You wanted to create that trust. So I think these are things that Gautam will have to quickly get to. So that's when you win the dressing room. The players trust you and they'll jump over a cliff for you if need be.
Mm. Yeah, and talking from the Australian perspective, I think one thing that we've known since Andrew and Pat have been working together is just how much they all talk about how much they love playing for this team, how happy the team environment is, how well they get on together. And you remember back to after Perth when Travis Head was interviewed and he was asked then, is there any friction amongst the group? And he almost just laughed it off. I mean, every team's allowed to have a bad week and a bad game, and it's how you stick together and respond from that. And the Australians did really, really well. I guess the only thing, and I don't know anything really about what happens inside the Indian dressing room with the coach or the interaction between the coach and the players, but the only thing I would say was after the Melbourne Test, where it was reported that Gambia had spoken to a lot of the players about, if you're not going to play the way that the team needs you to play, then thank you and goodbye, basically. But that should have been his mantra before the first game that he ever played. Not halfway through a series as a coach. You can't try and change it then. If he came in as coach, that should have been the first thing that he said, because then the players are accountable from the start, not halfway through a test match and halfway through a series. So, so I think if he had his time over, he might have done that. And the interesting thing for me with that as well is with the way that, Rishabh was the one that had the fingers pointed at him in Melbourne after his second innings dismissal there. The way he played in the first innings in Sydney compared to the way that he played in the second innings in Sydney, so you just, as a coach, your messaging has to be so clear. There can't be any confusion at all with the way you want individuals to play or the way that you want your team to play. And Gautam's only been there a short period of time. I think he would have learnt a lot about his group, about this group of players that he's got on this tour, and he's got a terrific group of players The young guys that he's got there, what I saw with Nitesh Reddy in Melbourne, that was a serious Test match 100. So the playing quality's there. He will learn more and more about them, as Ravi said. He'll learn more about their personalities and their character, and that's when you do that and you know your players inside out, then you can communicate well. Then that's when you get the best out of your team.
Even Sanjana with Jasprit. Okay, let me cast my mind back to Jasprit when he came into the team. He was quiet. He was a little bit of an introvert, but you would imagine that in the sense he wanted to know the other players better. He was more a product of white ball cricket. He had played for the Mumbai Indians, and then from there he comes in and very quickly comes through the ranks. We summoned him to Australia. Unfortunately, they couldn't get a visa for him. But the moment he landed, we started winning every game. But you saw a desire, you saw a hunger, and you saw ambition with Jasprit Bumrah. He was not there to fill in the numbers. He wanted to stride up the ranks very, very quickly, and that was very noticeable. He asked the right questions. He had a clear mindset in what was his strengths, and he focused on that. And this was like a sponge, willing to listen. I know many conversations he's had in the dressing room with the bowling coaches, with other players, just observing from a distance, competitors, and wanting to learn and having a computer of his own in his mind, sussing out strengths and weaknesses of opposition players. And you could see that, very early. So you have to encourage that. You have to make sure that, that carries on. Because no two players are the same. Rishabh Pant, totally different. Rishabh Pant has gone, like yesterday I asked a question. When do you make up your mind? I think Ricky spent enough time with him. When did you make up your mind that you're going to step out to Boland in the second innings first ball? Whilst you were coming to the crease or after taking guard? He said, I took guard. I was very clear in my mind that I wanted to hit. And as he started running, I said, I'm also starting to run from here. So that is Rishabh for you. And, where you want, you don't get too many players like that, who can turn a game on its head. His batting in that second innings on that track was unbelievable. It almost turned out to be a match-winning innings. And you want those players to play with that kind of freedom, and there are 10 other players in the side. There are 6 other batsmen. If one guy takes off in that fashion, he'll do the job for you, as he's done many times.
It's interesting that you spoke about a quiet and a reserved Jasprit Bumrah, because at the end of day one in Sydney, that's not what we saw. A fiery end to the day. There was also an indirect tit for tat between both the coaches, because they came out vehemently supporting their players. My question to both of you is, Andrew McDonald highlighted India's celebrations at the end of day one. Do you think that was right?
You're asking me?
Both of you.
There will be heated arguments. The tempers can fly like this in a matter of no time, especially when two teams have gone head to head with each other and, played unbelievable cricket. They've drawn the attention of the cricketing world, when they play against each other. It's billions watching. There are thousands sitting at the ground and watching. So, things can go off very, very quickly. It takes something. So I think Jasprit might have wanted another over to be bowled. So he might have been in a little bit of a hurry. Usman might not have been ready, so he held back. And then Sam went into the contest, which I thought was totally unnecessary, because, that's between Khwaja and Bumrah, whatever has to happen. But for him to barge in, that's what got Jasprit going. And see, when it happens with your captain, then the others also come in. So, there were guys coming in from everywhere. And it worked. You saw that animated this thing at the end of it, the celebration, because they got the wicket of Usman Khwaja. So then there was no holding back. They all jumped into the fray. And such things happen. I've seen it many, many times in cricket. Start the next day, it's totally different.
Yeah, there's two things there, isn't there? I totally agree with what Ravi said. That wasn't Sam's battle. The battle was between Bumrah and Khawaja. And it happens all the time. Batsmen will always try and take time out of the game to try and slow it down. Bowlers will always rush through. But the way that I was taught to play the game is when the bowler's ready, the batsman should be ready to face up. And when Sam decided to get involved, then Usman had to leave his crease and come down and try and settle things down. And I actually think that made Usman lose his concentration. If you look at the way that he played that last ball, he went back to one that was pretty much a half volley. So I don't think he was switched on in the moment either. So I think there was a huge learning curve there for Sam. Stay out of it. It's not your fight. Your fight's going to be the next morning when you go back out there and face up to that attack. The Andrew McDonald, the coaching thing. Look, I expect all coaches to defend their players. That's the role of the coach, and that's what Andrew should have done in the press conference. But also understand that when you start something, and there was the Australians that started it. When you start something, you've got to expect there's going to be something coming back your way. So I had no issue. With what India did. I had no issue with the way they celebrated because if someone starts something, you're going to come back harder. You're not going to come back. You're not going to come back in less than what had just happened to you. So, what Andrew said about just checking in with the player to make sure he's okay. Yep, great. That's great coaching. But I think in life, if you're going to talk the talk, you've got to walk the walk, and that's what came back in Australia's face.
And since we're on the topic of Sam Constas, let's quickly get this one out of the way. What did you make of his initiation into Test cricket? It was tough, but he was flamboyant. He played the last 2 Test matches. What did you think of his technique with the bat and everything else?
I actually don't know what to make of it so far, to be honest. He's just seemed to be this little pest running around trying to upset the Indians everywhere that he goes. There's no doubt the way that he started in Melbourne, that definitely flustered India. That definitely got under India's skin. They weren't ready for that. In fact, I don't think any Australian was ready for that either. And I don't think Sam's teammates were ready for what he did that morning on day one because he doesn't play that way in Sheffield Shield cricket. He doesn't, and he doesn't need to. But when you're taking a step up against the best bowlers in the world and you're under pressure with your defensive game, you've got to try and find a way to score. So what it looked like for me was Sam was when he started playing the ramps and the scoops, that was because he just wasn't trusting his defence enough. And we saw that he's got some shots, but a lot of the shots that we saw were reckless. I don't think you can survive as a Test opening batsman playing like that all the time. So he will learn a lot from the first couple of games that he played as a batsman, but just as an international sportsman as well. I think he'll learn a lot. It's a big stage, and he really enjoyed the stage there at the MCG. But I've seen this happen a lot with young players. They come in, they get overawed by everything a little bit, and it takes them a few games or a few series just to actually work out who they are and who they need to be successful international players.
I think it was more the exuberance of youth, and he was like a cat on a hot tin roof. He wanted to announce himself straight away. There was a lot of talk. He's someone who'll take the attack to the opposition. And he wanted to walk the talk. And he did that. He flustered India. There's no doubt about that in Melbourne. But my advice to him would be, you've got talent. The focus should be scoring runs more than anything else. You focus on your strengths. You play the way you want. But remember one thing that as an opening batsman, you've got to back your defense as well. So I think this tour of Sri Lanka in many ways will help him. Getting out of Australia, playing overseas, and then getting to learn a lot of other things and maturing.
Ravi, there were several big headlines that came out of this series, but one of them was people missing Mohammad Shami. They thought that if he was part of this series, he could have provided adequate support to Jasprit Bumrah. Given how tight the last 2 Test matches were, would you say that is a logical claim or one that might have tilted the result?
Absolutely, there's no question about that. To be honest, I was very surprised with the communication going on in the media as to what's exactly happened to Mohammad Shami. Where is he, when it comes to recovery? He's been sitting in the NCA for I don't know how long. Why can't proper communication come out on where he stands? Because a player of his ability, I would have brought him to Australia. I would have kept him part of the team and made sure that his whatever his this rehabilitation had to be done was done with the team. And then, if we thought by the third Test match that no, this guy can't play the rest of the series, I would let him go. I would let him go. But I would have brought him with the team, kept him, monitored him with the best of the physios and best of the advice, even from international physios who are in Australia, and seen how he went. But I would have kept him in the mix. You need it, see, because it got so tight at 1-1 going into Melbourne. Jasprit needed that experience and support. For all you know, he might have raised the bar as well. And it would have been, with two guys there. See, Pat Cummins couldn't have done it on his own. Scotty Boland had to step in. So you needed a bowler of his experience. As well as Mohammad Siraj tried, you needed Shami's experience there and skill.
Yeah, I totally agree with Ravi. I was really surprised when he wasn't flown out even halfway through the series. 2 Test matches in. And the reason I say that as well is because India's makeup obviously had Nitesh Reddy there. So you had another seam bowling all-rounder anyway. So if Shami, even if he wasn't fully fit, if he had to bowl fewer overs in a day, you had a backup seam bowling option to help him out. And I think he could have been the difference. It's actually, I think, Sanjana, when you asked me at the start about what I thought the result would be, I said 3-1 Australia because Shami wasn't there. That was the first thing I said. And that's how important I felt he was to India, that if Shami, Bumrah and Siraj were in their starting team, I think things could have been completely different here in Australia.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about something a little more positive. Quite a few youngsters in that Indian setup. Ravi, for you, which one seems to be the brightest who has the brightest future in red ball cricket? Who do you see this team being built around over the next decade?
I think gun player. You found a gun player he was always talented, but after his show in Australia, I think this guy will be for the next decade at the top. A fantastic player, Yashasvi Jaiswal. I think he's a kind of player who could get a 100 in Test cricket. With the way he plays, he's got the full range of shots. I think a tough tour like Australia, playing on these wickets, which he would have never dreamt of playing on, would only toughen him up. That exposure will make him a better player. So I think he's a standout. I think Shubman Gill, let's not count him off. He's very much in the mix. He's been up and down the order. I was surprised he was dropped in Melbourne, when someone averages over 40 in the year. So, he still has the talent as far as I'm concerned. And then there's Nitish Reddy. That knock in Melbourne, even Ricky referred to that, was special. I mean, it showed so much character that he's got the mind. He's got to read the game, suss the conditions. And even on that, in the second innings here, the shot was on. The ball just skidded on, hit the bottom of the bat. But you could see there was a sense of calmness and composure with the way he played. I think he should be encouraged as well.
What made this series even more remarkable, Ricky, was the amount of buzz it created, the number of people that came in to watch these matches. We had a record-breaking Boxing Day test and the support both these sides saw. Would you think it's safe to say that this currently is the biggest rivalry in Test cricket, probably even bigger than the Ashes?
Well, I think I had a look at the numbers yesterday. It was something like 837,000 people came to watch the Test matches, which is unheard of here in Australia. I mean, Boxing Day in itself was incredible. 375,000 came to the Boxing Day Test. Sydney only went for the 3 days, but all 3 days of Sydney were complete sellouts as well. So right now, it's really hard to argue that this isn't the biggest rivalry in world cricket. It's grown year on year. And I think Ravi and I, we've been a part of most of these the last 15, 20 years. We've felt how it's been growing and growing, and the rivalry gets bigger. And now the fans are into it as well. The fans understanding how good these two cricket teams are, want to be there and want to be part of it and want to see Test match cricket at its absolute best. So now that this series has happened, Australia have England coming out next summer. So it's going to be. We'll get a better idea then. Like if the numbers aren't the same, then there will be no doubt that the rivalry, certainly from the fans' point of view. I mean, there's two separate parts to this, right? There's what the fans want to see and the rivalry that they want to make of it, but it's also how the players view the rivalry between the three teams now. So, but exactly this time next year, we'll have a great idea of the biggest rivalry in world cricket.
But Sanjana, the bar has been raised. The bar has been raised big time. One stat stands out: 375,000 people coming through the gates, in that Melbourne Test match, beating the record set 90 years ago of 350. 1936-37, when the G could hold 120,000 people when Bradman was playing. So it just goes to show the sudden interest in the modern era for people to get out there and watch cricket when there is television, when there is OTT platforms, where all that is there, for still 375,000 people to come and then replicate that in Sydney with full houses. Unreal.
Yeah, and the other thing to add to that, Ravi, the number I said of 837,000. Remember, Perth only went 4 days. Adelaide only went 3 days. Sydney only went 3 days. So those numbers would have been astronomical if those Test matches all go 5 days.
Yep.
Absolutely. The curtains are now drawn on this Border-Gavaskar trophy, but that means we have our World Test Championship finalists. It's going to be South Africa versus Australia at Lord's. What are the first impressions when you look at both these teams and what they have on offer?
My first impression is the batsmen watch out from both sides because both sides have got good fast bowlers. It's June in England, and if the Lord's pitch is fresh, it's early June. It's not even mid-June normally, or July when a Test match happens at Lord's. It's the first week of June or 10th of June. And when you have Rabada, you have with that kind of attack that South Africa have 2 or 3 good fast bowlers. There was Aussie pace attack. Scotty Boland will be there at Lord's. Make no mistake about it. And that will be the challenge for me. My first impressions is to watch the fast bowlers, and it's how the batsmen cope up.
Yeah, it's exactly the same with me. We were only talking about it yesterday when it looked like Australia were going to win and guarantee their spot in it. And it was all the talk was about Rabada. It was about Marco Jansen, who's improved in leaps and bounds in the last 12 months with bat and ball. And it was a bit the same. Remember back to last year's one at the Oval when that Test match started. That was a really green wicket as well. Australia hit a really green surface and was definitely hard for batting early on. So I think the preparation of the pitch and what the pitch looks like a couple of days out will be what everyone's looking at. But you'd have to say it's been from the South Africans' point of view, I mean, this probably highlights how good Australia's been for a long period of time. So the last 3 World Test Championship cycles, they should have been in 3 cycles ago. Run rate cost them being in the final. They made it to the final, obviously, the last cycle against India, and they've been good enough to get through. So that talks about how good this team's been over a long period of time. And thankfully, they were good enough to win the one at the Oval last year, and it should be a great contest, the one coming up at Lord's. But South Africa's been the other way. Their Test cricket had really dropped off the last few years, and it's been a really good revitalisation, if you like, of South African Test cricket to find themselves back up at the top again.
So, Ricky, here's a tricky one for you. Come June at Lord's, if you have Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood, Lyon and Boland all fit, then who misses out? Ravi definitely thinks Boland gets a look in the 11. Who's missing out for you?
All play.
yeah, we'll have to leave a batsman out, actually. And make it... look, I mean, I think, and if you get a wicket that looks like it's got any grass on it at all, it's just so hard now to leave Boland out. He's just so good in those conditions. And he's been the unfortunate thing for Hazelwood over the last couple of years when he's missed out. It's normally been on the best wickets to bowl on. Scott Boland's bowled on a lot of really helpful seam-friendly wickets. So if they get to Lord's, and as Ravi said, it's the start of June, if they get there and it's going to be green, then it's going to be a really tough call to leave Boland out. So I'm gonna have to sit on the fence here. I'm not going to pick anyone that comes out, but it's pretty hard to leave Boland out now with what he's done.
Alrighty, we've been pressing for predictions from the two of you since the start of this Border-Gavaskar trophy, and just to continue that trend, we've got the Champions Trophy to look ahead to. Give us your 2 finalists for that tournament. Why? And why?
Champions Trophy finalists. I mean, I'll go for semi-finals. I'll put Australia, India, South Africa, and England.
Playing it very safe, Ravi. I need two teams. These are the
Okay,
four
so
that
no,
make it to almost
okay.
every semi-final.
No, then I'll say India, Australia.
Okay.
Yeah, right, who'd you say, Rav? India, Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think it's pretty hard to argue against that, to be honest. I mean, the one other team that are playing some really good cricket at the moment is Pakistan. Pakistan's one day cricket over the last little bit has been absolutely outstanding. So we know they're not always the most predictable team in those big tournaments, but they seem like they've sorted things out a little bit. Obviously, it's at home as well for them, which might help or might make it harder. So I would throw them into the mix. But it's hard to go past India and Australia again. I just think the quality of players in both countries right now. And you look back in recent history. You know, when these big finals in big ICC events have come around, inevitably Australia and India are there somewhere. So I'll say Australia, India, but also I think Pakistan will be pretty close as well.
Okay. We also want an early tip from you for that World Test Championship final at Lord's. Which of these two sides is crossing the finish line and why?
Australia. Australia. I think Australia will retain it.
Mm.
Yeah, there's still a few issues with the Aussie batting, I think, as well. I mean, like you look through this series, and top order batters from both sides struggle because of the wickets and the conditions. I mean, I'm obviously going to tip Australia. I would never ever tip against Australia. I think, you know, they've got such a good and experienced team, and you know the key to Australia in these big games has been Travis Head, and even yesterday, you watched yesterday. The freedom that he has and the clarity he has with his own game now, he wasn't overawed at all by the situation yesterday. You think back to the World Cup semi-final, he was man of the match. He was man of the match in the World Cup final, and he was man of the match in last year's World Test Championship as well. So he's the key. Because of that freedom in his mind, these bigger games don't bother him. So I think Australia will just have the better of South Africa.
Righty, you heard it here first, and that brings us to the end of another edition of the ICC Review, a special one since we have both of you on together. But thank you so much. Wonderful insight as always. We cannot wait to chat with you about all of the tournaments that are to follow.
Thank you.
Well done, Ricky. Well done, Ricky, on the trophy.
Cheers, Rav. Good on
well
you.
done, Sandra.
Cheers.